Alright everybody, this is Jordan from All Us Geeks. Geek Compound got in a couple expansions for Diskwars recently, so I'm going to be doing a quick look at Legions of Darkness and everybody's squat favorites, Hammers and Hold. So this is the Dwarf Heavy and the VC Heavy, Vampire Counts Heavy expansions for Diskwars. Alrighty, so here are some of the expansion informations. Some of the fluff that they're doing, or I should say some of the other sets that they're expanding on are Empire and High Elves from the first, from the core set. Neither are getting new heroes, but they're getting a couple standard infantry, standard Empire units. First is the Warrior Priest. He's a magic user in the game, and he's got some good stats here. He's mounted. My cat does not like the Empire. He's got Impact 2, and while he's empowered, he gains some resistance. He's 9 points. And then there's the Talabakland. Oh, Halberdiers, I almost called them something else. They have Swift and they are 5 points. Both have decent middling stats, you know, 2 and 4. The Halberdiers are much better on defense. Put it on the camera. The Halberdiers are much better on defense, as they should be. They just stand there and let people run into their big pointy things. The Warrior Priest, again, his horse hits things with him on the defense, so both are a little bit better on defense than offense, but the Priest himself has Impact, which is always a bonus, and they both have 4 wounds. I like seeing both of these added to the Empire's core set. On the Wood Elf side, also no heroes added, but they get Silver Helms. These guys are good. They're cavalry as well. Swift and Impact 3, and good stat lines, 5 and 4 and 5 wounds. And their infantry are the Lothern Sea Guard. These guys are missile and mobile, so they can move and shoot. They have medium range. And kind of middling stats, but that's what they are in the game. They're 3 and 3 with 3. They can take 3 hits, but they're not your stand up and fight elves. They run around and shoot things from distance. So this is a good add to what the High Elves already had with their war machines. And, you know, I'm thinking of just trying a High Elf disc army here one time just to see what it can do with what it has in place right now. The new factions that they've added are Lizardmen and Wood Elves. They both have heroes, so you can use these as allies right out of the box. These are not full armies. Only the dwarves came with full armies. So these guys would definitely have to be allies. The Wood Elves come with Draika as their hero. She builds for 34 points and has some pretty decent stats. She'll get you 2 command cards, has 1 wound, takes 6 hits before getting that wound, and is a 4 and 4. She's a caster, she's mobile, she's got Strider, and her activation is you can flip any number of unpinned, well, hopefully they're not drunk either, unpinned forced allies once. So that's kind of a good kind of movement boost, you know, get people into position and then flip them, or flip them to get away from something, get it out of range, and then move them around. So this is a bit of a maneuver hero here. And the artwork on her is pretty solid. She's a nice little, well, I don't know that you'd call her nice, She looks kind of badass for a dryad, but there she is. And the Wood Elves start with War Dancers. These guys are fast. They're 3 and 3 and 4 hits, so standard humanoid stat line. But they're infantry and swift, and while not embattled, they'll gain 2 attack and 2 defense, so they'll go 5 to 5. The art on all the Wood Elves is kind of cool. Well, the art on everything in the game is all kind of cool. And their other unit are the Athelloran Dryads. These are a little bit more buff than the War Dancers. They're 4 and 4 with 5 hits. They're Forest and Strider, so you know everything with Strider can move around terrain without any difficulty. And when this disc flips over rough terrain after a flip, empower this disc. So it goes through rough terrain without any hindrance, and then gets a little bit buff for the remainder of that turn. So it's a good start for the Wood Elves here. A decent hero and a couple good units to build from. At 34 points, you can't use everything that comes in the box, but I think she'd be a good ally for you know, if you want to do a 2 or a 3 hero army with the High Elves, or even the Lizards. If you do a 2 hero army with the Lizard here, and I'll get to them now. Their hero is Chakax. He's pretty buff. He's fast. He at 5 movement. He has 2 command cards and 1 wound, and he attacks for 6 and defends for 5 and can take 5 hits. And that was totally off camera. That is horrible handwork. He's a hero. He is relentless, and when engaged with a hero, this disc gains swift, so he'll get first strike on both attack and defense. He's looking a little BA in there with the helm with the horns on it and pointing out "you're next." Yeah, so he looks kind of nice. And then the units it comes with are Skink Skirmishers. They're not all that tough with only a 2 and a 2 and then 3 wounds, but they're mobile and they have poison and they're at medium range. There's a lot of new mechanics in the game here, and poison is one of them. There's poison, stalwart, guard, fear, and in place, and those are all explained on the in the insert. But essentially, poison does bad things to you. Doesn't matter what the game is. And then the other thing he has is the salamander. And these guys are buff. They're not as fast as the other units with only a movement of 4, but they attack for 4, defend for 3, and take 5 wounds. They're mobile, so they can move and shoot. And on a hit, I should say, their action is deal d6 minus 1 damage to target within short range. So they got to get up close and personal on somebody. But as you can see from the art, then they just breathe some fire on you. And d6 minus 1 is potential to, on a good roll, kill pretty much everything in one shot, or at least at the hero level, put a wound on somebody. So again, as with the Wood Elves, there's not enough to field the whole army here, but they are good allies to your other forces of order. At 34 points, again, you can't field everything that the Lizards come with, but you can get a little variety. And now on to the core part of this expansion, the Dwarves. This is what I was looking forward to, because this is the only forces of order that I play in the minis game, and I was looking to see how they were going to implement them in the cardboard game. The Dwarves come with 3 heroes. I'm going to start with Thorgrim Grudgebearer. He is slow, but hey, he's a dwarf. He only moves 3. He attacks for 3 and he defends for 5. but he can take 6 hits before taking a wound, and he has 2 wounds. So all the other heroes to date only had 1 hero, I should say only had 1 wound. He is resistant to magic, and he gains 1 impact for each small dwarf disc in your casualty pile. So as you run out of your warriors and your hammerers and your thunderers and your miners, he's going to get a little bit more buff. It's going to take him a while to get somewhere, but when he gets there, he is going to drop the dwarven hammer on somebody. I'm looking forward to getting him out there, I think, and just running kind of a suicide line just to see how that would go. He builds at 32 points and gets you a command card, 2 command cards. Then we have Grombrindle, the White Dwarf. He's a little bit more fleet of foot. He moves at 5. He attacks for 6 and defends for 3, has 1 wound and takes 5 hits. And he's got Frenzy and Stalwart and an ability that to activate and deal 3 damage to each disc engaged with this disc. So that's you know, encouragement to get him in there. Now I generally play Dwarf Gunline, and I'm going to try that here too. But you know, once there's a pylon on this dude, you can activate him, and assuming he has lived, and with 1 wound he's got some survivability, he's got the ability to clear out some of the chaff that might be on him. So he's got a good ability, and he builds at 33 points and gets you 2 command cards. And the last hero that they come with, or heroine in this case, is Queen Helga, the sexy dwarf heroine. She builds at 34 points, gets you 2 command cards, 1 wound, 4 move, and 4 attack, and 5 counterattack. And a nice ability of each other dwarf disc within short range gains Swift. So she's going to give folks first strike that are around her. And I think that's cool. It's a good way of getting around kind of the dwarven slowness. Eventually people are going to get there, and when they do, they're going to impact hard or hit first, or get to do a little bit extra damage once they get there. So looking forward to building a three hero list with all 3 of these, just to see how they play. And then down onto the unit side, got all the standard kind of dwarf units. Got some the warriors. They're going to come out and play. They got the miners. Again, this is all standard core stuff. Got hammerers. They just walk out there and hit stuff, as you can see from their stats. They hit for 5 and counterattack for 4. And they got the Thunderers, which is the start of the Dwarven gun line. The dwarves have pistols as opposed to most of the other armies, except the Empire. They have, most everybody else has bows, but the Dwarven Empires have pistols and rifles, and this is part of my dwarf gun line. These dudes are not mobile, so they cannot move and shoot, but they do have a range of medium, and if they hit, they are doing 4 damage. So that's good. It's good damage. As you can see, they're not meant to stand and fight with only a 2 and 2. But I'm looking forward to getting a few of these out there. And then on the artillery side, they've got the flame cannon. The dwarves are big on their cannons, so they got a flame cannon. It's only got range medium, but it will do 6 hits. Unfortunately, if this disc rolls hits or crits during the ranged attack, it'll deal 2 extra damage to each other disc within short range of the target. So, well, I mean, unfortunately for the opponent. So, you know, so it's just a little flamethrower on wheels, and it goes out there and sprays, and its primary target's going to take 6, and if it's doing crits, it's going to, people around it are going to take some damage as well. And then it costs 9, so it is, I think, relatively inexpensive compared to the runic cannon, which is coming up. As with all their artillery, they have slow movement and no attack, so these are just supposed to be, you know, fire pieces from the back row. Excuse me. So here's the runic cannon. It is a war machine. It has siege range, so it is really just going to sit in your deployment zone and then fire, fire, and fire. It does 4 damage, and it costs 12 points. So it is expensive, but I think it's totally worth it for a pair of hits doing 4 damage. You treat the hits and the crits also as deviation. So as I read that, you're going to do your damage, and then you're also going to bounce the cannonball into somebody else, maybe. And I assume that's not an endless chain, that it's just a one-time thing, and I'd have to double check that. But I think for 12 points, for a chance to do at least 4 damage twice, I think that's a good, I think that's worth the points. They've got statues now. They've added some statues to the game for the dwarves. They've got ancestor statues. You can see a lot of dashes, so it doesn't move, it doesn't attack, it doesn't defend. But it does give an in-game effect. I think this is pretty cool. And power up to 2 other dwarf discs within medium range. So you just drop these out there if you have the stable, or what is it, the farm from the first game, that if you hold, you can reinforce from there. So just hold that and then drop one of these out, and your discs within short range are going to be empowered. So that's a little buff, an ongoing buff while your dwarves are around it. I think that's a good mechanic add to the game. And then we've got the 2 other character type mainstays for dwarves. Got the Master Engineer. Excuse me, the Master Engineer. You can see he's a little bit fleet of foot. He's not a fighter though, but his ability is to remove the use token from your dwarf war machines within short range. So your use token, your activation token. So he's just going to hang back with your war machines. And if you so choose, you can just activate him to remove the activation tokens from a war machine, and then use that war machine again. Especially with that cannon, that is going to be a good combo. And the flame cannon, you know, it comes with 3, so you can kind of build 2, 1 for each of these, and 1 for each of the artillery, and then get double activation each round out of them, essentially. Which is gonna, if you roll well, so it won't benefit me, but if you roll well, you should be able to chew up a lot of your opponents even before they get to you. So I'm looking forward to seeing these dudes in action. And then the other hero type character they have are the runesmiths. A little fast, a little hit a little bit better, but again, not much on the counterattack and not many hits. But their ability is to empower target dwarf disc within short range. So that is, again, at 6 points. Oh, the runesmith has 6 points and the engineer is 8 points. So they are, I think, middle of the road for their hero type costs. But they both have decent powers. I think being able to empower somebody, especially these dwarves that have medium to you know, average to just barely above average stats, I think this is a good way to make them a little bit more buff. And then the last thing they have is the gyrocopters, which are cool. They're, you know, the dwarves are, you know, the engineers. So rather than having dragons or, you know, birds, they've got helicopters. So they got a little gyrocopter here. As you can see, it's a little bit fast, a little bit buff, and it can take some hits, and it has a wound. So that's good. And then its class is a war machine, so your engineer can proc his power on it if you so choose. It's flying and mobile, so it can move and shoot, and stalwart. And it's got range medium, so it's pretty much 4s across the board for damage. It attacks at 4, defends at 4, and its range damage is 4. on 1 die. So it costs 12 points, so it's as much as your cannon. It doesn't deviate like the cannon, but it does fly, so it can get around everywhere, and it is mobile, so it can move and shoot. So this is definitely, for 12 points, something to put 1 in my army with. 2, don't know that I'd do 2, it's 24 points. Maybe at a higher point game, but at like 100 points or so, maybe not do that. But there you go. That is the character. That's all the discs, and then they have a new piece of terrain. We've got the Dwarven Forge and, surprisingly, a mine. And they both have some pretty interesting in-game effects. The Forge is defensive and gives cover. And if a player controls this terrain, allied dwarf heroes gain Runesmith. And the mine entrance is fortified, and when you place this terrain, you may deploy 1 smaller medium disc overlapping it. Excuse me. So if you choose this terrain and put it out, the top ability is for the Dwarven Forge, but the mine entrance, if you play that and put it out, you can throw out a smaller medium disc with it right away. So that's a cool little ability to go along with this. I'm really looking forward to getting the dwarves on the table. So this was Hammer and Hold, the first part of the 2 expansions that I'm going to be looking at for Diskwars. Alrighty, and now I'm back for the second half. Now I'm looking at the Legions of Darkness, the VC heavy expansion for Diskwars. I'm going to start with the new factions again. We're going to get Dark Elves and Skaven. So evil elves and rats. Skaven are going to get 1 hero, Icket Claw. He's okay, he's fast, he attacks and he hits back and he can take a wound. And his ability is, he's a caster, Magic 3, and his ability, this disc can use magic to target on enemies within long range. So he breaks the the magic medium range rule. He can go all the way to long, and he can hit a little bit hard with that. And Icket comes with rattling guns, not Gatling guns, mind you, rattling guns. So you can see they're not that fast because, well, they're carrying big guns. And melee, they're not all that buff with only 2 and 2, and they take 4 hits. But they're mobile, so they can move and shoot. And then at medium range, they do 2 damage and deal 2 damage to each disc you resolved a deviation against instead of re-rolling the deviation. So they are, well, they're called rattling guns, but they really are kind of Gatling guns. You just point them at something, crank, and they're going to hit a whole lot of stuff. Hopefully if you roll well anyways. These guys are, I mean, pretty standard rat. I don't know that I'm going to get Skaven in the blood here. Certainly not with just what we have here. Again, as with the dwarf set, the 2 new factions here are strictly allies. They can't be played independently except at a 1 general, I should say a 1 hero level. The other unit they come with is the Gutter Runners. Oops, sorry, the Gutter Runners. As you can see, they're pretty fast. They hit okay, and they're pretty soft, though they don't take a whole lot of wounds. But their ability is that they are scouts and stealth. So stealth is cool. You stick them on a piece of terrain and you can't see them. And then they're not mobile, so they got to get somewhere. But they do have medium range, and if they hit, they do 2 damage. So Icket Claw is builds at 33 points and gets you 2 command cards. The rattling guns are 9 and the gutter runners are 7. So again, you can't build everything that you've got, but you can make a couple choices. I don't know, I might try these just 1 time as allies in kind of a mixed army. But I don't know that I would want to build around them if even if they keep coming out with them. It's rats. They just don't do much for me. The other new faction is the Dark Elves. Their hero is, excuse me, Lokir Fellheart. He's pretty buff. He moves fast, he hits hard, he counterattacks hard, he takes 4 hits, and he can take a wound. He gets you 2 command cards, and he builds at 33 points. He's got Fear and Frenzy. Fear is a new mechanic here. There's some new mechanics, as with the Hammer and Hold. The new mechanics here are Fear, Poison here as well, and Reanimate. Fear is nice. When a disc with Fear is pinning somebody, the pinned disc's counterattack is treated at 1. And then his ability is, while this disc is on the battlefield, Corsairs, which is a type of unit, discs in your reserve gain flank. So let's go look at the Corsairs. Black Arc Corsairs are an infantry unit. You can see they're fast, they hit hard, they don't counterattack hard, and they got some decent life. And they've got a long list of things here. They're infantry, they've got missile weapons, they're mobile, and they have stealth. So as long as Lokir is out, they also have flank while they're in the reserve, so they can come out, not necessarily in your deploy zone if you don't want them to, and then they can do all their other fun stuff once they're out there. I think having mobile stealth is pretty good. They only have short range for 2 damage, but then they're only 6 points, and I think for 6 points, all that stuff, especially combined with Lokir, is pretty good. If they should get caught in combat, I mean, they're not going to swing back for a lot, but they are going to do for if they are the attacker. So yeah, I think for 6 points, these are a good add, or I guess a good start for the Dark Elves. And then their other units are Harpies. You can see they're fast. Middling stat line after that, standard counterattack and attack and wounds. They cost 7, but they do fly, and discs engaged with Harpies gain slow on attack and counterattack. So they're gonna harry people and slow them down. 7 points versus 6 for the Corsairs. I think either these are overpriced or the Corsairs are pretty efficient. I don't think flying is worth that 1 extra point, but this is something, again, as with the rats, I might try as a kind of an easy allied for a mixed army. So that's the 2 new factions, the rats and the Dark Elves. As with Hammer and Hold, they're expanding the existing factions. As with them, the existing factions get no new heroes. Chaos, it looks like, is embracing the Warriors and the Demons of Chaos as 1 faction. In the minis game, these are separated as 2 factions. But right here, we've got Daemonettes, which are part of their own faction in the minis game. So it looks like they're combining Warriors and Demons. The Daemonettes are infantry, demonic, and swift. They're fast, they move at 6, they hit hard at 4, they only counterattack at 2, and they're 6 points. They don't really, oh, they're only swift on the attack, I should say. They're nothing special, but I think for a fast infantry unit to flush out the Warriors, the Chaos in general, I think they're okay. And then the other thing is Screamers. Again, they're pretty standard. They move for 3, they attack 3, counterattack for 2. They can take 5 hits of those, so they've got a little survivability. And then they have fear and flying. So they're going to get wherever they need to go pretty fast. Even though their movement is only 3, flying will get them over stuff. And then they have fear once they're on somebody. So they have survivability both in terms of hits, and whoever they're on, their counterattack is going to be reduced to 1. So that 5 is going to be, unless they're on 2 or 3 discs, that 5 is going to be a pretty good number of hits to take. And the other reinforcements are for the Orcs and Goblins. we're getting the Goblin Doom Diver, and this is fun. This is a good adaptation of the minigame. The Goblin Doom Diver is it's catapult, and it essentially, in the fluff, it just flings goblins at people. So the Goblin Doom Diver, it doesn't move around a lot, only 2 movement. Obviously no attack and only a little bit of counter strike. Only takes 3 hits, but it does have 1 wound. But its ability is activate reinforce, so this is letting you reinforce 1 Goblin Doom Diver within medium range. So let's look at the Goblin Doom Diver. And the Goblin Doom Diver is pretty funny. Again, this is a goblin thing. Life is not precious with the goblins. So it moves 5, it doesn't attack and it doesn't counterattack, and it only takes 2 hits. It has no wounds, but its missile flying impact 5. So when it hits hard and it's probably going to kill. This disc cannot be deployed and can only be reinforced by a Doom Diver. So you're not putting this out ever. This is just coming out from the Doom Diver. The catapult is throwing these things at people. If the disc takes a wound when it deals, this disc takes a wound when it deals impact damage. So even though it can take 2 hits, it's going to take an actual wound every time it hits. So it's going to die every time. So these goblins are just your artillery, or just your ammunition for the artillery. It's going to get in there, it's going to do 5 impact hit, and 5 is enough to wipe out pretty much any of the non-hero level discs, and certainly get a wound at least on many of the hero level characters. And the other unit they have, again, goblins. So in the game it's orcs and goblins, and I believe everything in the original book, in the original box, except the caster was all orc. So now we're getting some of the goblins from Orc and Goblin, and here is the Night Goblins. Fast with 5, a little bit below standard stat line with 3 attack, 2 counterattack, and 2 wounds, but they're cheap, they're only 4. I think I was off camera a little bit there. But while within short range of at least one other Orc and Goblin disc, this disc gains +1 attack and +1 defense. So if you get these dudes in a swarm, which you should because they're cheap, they're going to buff each other. It's not a stack, so it's at least 1 other disc. So if you put out 3, they're not going to get +2/2 for each other for 2 other discs. It's not a stack, it's just a minor buff, but these can all buff each other to make themselves a little bit better. These are definitely good adds for the Orc and Goblins. The Chaos stuff I was kind of meh on. They flesh it out, but it didn't really bring any flavor. But I think the Orcs and the Goblin side of this expansion was much better. Now on to the meat of the box, the Vampire Counts. This is my primary army in the minis game, so I was really looking forward to these coming out, and I think these dudes are going to be fun to play, even as they stand just right now, and whatever expansions they come out with. And there's plenty of room for expansions for all these armies. Whatever expansions they come out with, they're just going to make it better. So starting with the heroes, they get Heinrich Kemmler. He is kind of standard VC, average speed, average attack, better than average number of hits, and he can take a wound. He builds at 34 points and gets you 2 command cards. He is a caster, magic 3, and he can reanimate. He reanimates 1. Reanimate is one of the new mechanics, and this is kind of a VC thing. You can't quite do like the zombie tar pit like you can in the minis game, but with reanimate and raise dead here, you can bring stuff back for a round. So if you have multiple casters with reanimate, you can really choke up movement lines or throw stuff out there. Reanimate and raise dead, which is one of their abilities, lets you take stuff out of your wound pile. So as your discs are getting killed, you just bring them back. Reanimate puts a coffin token on them when they come back, and then when you're clearing tokens, you remove the coffin token and the disc goes back to the casualty pile. So they're there for around. They can clog stuff up, they can get under people, and do get you some extra use out of your dead units. Unlike the dwarfs, the one dwarf hero that I showed you that gets buffed for units in your casualty pile, this dude just gets just keeps cycling your dead folks back onto the playfield. And then this disc can use Reanimate to reinforce up to 3 skeleton discs. Now there are skeletons in here, so he can reanimate normally, or he can use the Reanimate to bring out 3 skeletons, which just puts out a bone wall in front of them, essentially. So I think this is a pretty cool hero to start with. Heinrich Himmler, he's 34 build points, and he gets you 2 command cards. That might have been repetition, I don't remember. Then we've got the named people of the VC world. Isabella von Karstein, a Lamian vampire. Fast at 5, attacks at 5, counterattacks at 4, can take 4 hits and has 1 wound, and gets you 2 command cards. She builds at 33 points. She's a caster, magic 2, and mobile, so she can move and cast. And then her activation is to remove a wound from this disc. So she's going to have a lot of longevity. If she's not activated first and takes a hit, she can just remain there and remove that hit. And if you do activate her earlier, she can get in there and do some damage. With four hits per wound, she's got a bit of survivability, and then the ability to remove a wound from the disc really adds to that. So she's got a good mix here of abilities and stats. And then the big dude, Manfred von Karstein, he is the big general for us right now. He's fast, he hits hard, he has a lot of hits, he has 5 hits, and he's another hero here now with 2 wounds. So he definitely has a lot of survivability. You're either going to have to concentrate on him for a couple turns, or hope for good artillery hits. He builds at 31 points, so he's buff, but he'll have your smallest army, and he gets you 2 command cards. He's a caster, magic 3, and he can reanimate 2. The reanimate is tiered. At 1, you can only do small discs. At 2, you can do small and medium, and then if you have anybody with reanimate 3, you can do small, medium, and large discs. So he has reanimate 2, and that's really all he does. He goes out there and hits things, and then brings things back for a round to irritate you. And since I mentioned big discs at reanimate 3, I'll show you our big disc. Zombie Dragon. It looks awesome. The artwork is great, and it's got a fairly interesting set of stats and abilities. It moves for 3, it hits for 5, counterattacks for 5, it takes 4 hits, and it has 1 wound. It is unique. It gives you fear, so when it's on something, and it's big, so it can be on a lot of things, their counterattack becomes 1. It's flying, and it is mobile. It does have a breath weapon. Its activation is deal d6 minus 2 melee damage or physical damage to target disc within medium range, and place an activation token on that disc. So it does a lot. It's gonna fly around. It's gonna breathe fire at you, or whatever a zombie dragon would breathe. Its breath weapon is gonna potentially do 4 points at max if you're rolling well. 4 points when you use it. And it slaps an activation on you. So all that for 14 points. It's one of the more expensive discs in the game, but I think it's a well-rounded piece, and it does a lot of stuff, and it does it well. And if you got somebody with Reanimate 3, you can bring it back for a round and irritate people with it again. And on the unit side, we got a lot of the basic vampire counts type stuff. Skeletons, you know, pretty weenie stats, and direwolves, fast but weenie stats. But that's kind of standard for the VC and the minis game, so it's not unexpected here. The direwolves, though, do have impact 1, so they are going to do a little bit of damage on the way in, and it does come with 3. And they're only 6 points each, so you could put these out there, and if you get everybody on one figure, I mean, if you're putting all 3 of them on one figure, hopefully it's a figure you're going to kill with 3 impact, because otherwise it's these are not durable with only three hits. And then the same thing with the skeletons. They're slow on the counterattack, so they're not going to do their damage at the same time. So it's they move for 4, but their stat line is just 3/3 and 3, and they're slow on the counterattack. So their saving grace, though, is that they're cheap. So 4, if you wanted to get another box set, or if somebody starts breaking these things up by units, you could get a whole whack of skeletons in your army for pretty inexpensively. These are not unique. Neither are the direwolves, obviously, because they come with 3 of them. So, you know, part of the VC tactic is swarm stuff. And with these dudes and the direwolves, well, you really wouldn't want to do it with the direwolves. Well, these dudes, you can start that swarm a little bit, and if you bust out a lot of skeletons, that just gives you reanimate stuff, a lot more stuff to work with. Then on the moving up the food chain of abilities, we've got the Grave Guard, which is one of my favorite kind of middle, better than average. This is a better than average VC unit. You see it moves for 4, hits for 4, counterattacks for 4, has 5 hits, but his ability is, while engaged with a small disc, this gains +1 attack and counterattack. So if he's hitting a small disc, or a small disc is hitting him, he's actually going to be 5/5, and they're only 8 points. I think at 8 points, if you're just going to use these to hunt down your opponent's small discs, they're a pretty good value. You're going to want to use skeletons and your direwolves and stuff to clog paths to them, so that they can get around to their targets. But I think at 8 points, a potential 5/5 is pretty good value. The Black Coach, it moves at 4, it attacks for 3, it defends for 3, it has a wound, and it takes 4 hits. It is unique. But it's got fear and impact 2, so it hits something and does 2, and then its counterattack, their counterattack is going to be reduced to 1. But while empowered, this disc gains 1 move and flying. An interesting fig. I don't know that I would put 2 in an army, but I think I would definitely mess around with 1. And we've got, actually I'll go over here to the Vargeists. You can see that they move for 5. They hit a little soft at 3, but they counterattack at 4. They can take 4 hits, but they're a little bit on the high end for VC troops at 9. But they're flying, they're frenzy, and this disc cannot be flipped onto non-hero small enemies. So they are definitely the role of medium and higher hunters. But given they have fear, anything that they land on is not going to counterattack efficiently. So at 9 points, again, a little expensive, but definitely for what it's going to do, forcing you to go after the medium and large bases with while giving them a poor counterattack, I think definitely a good option for a VC army. And then we've got Black Knights. Going to go with the Black Knights. 'Tis but a flesh wound. So these are some of our cavalry. They're pretty fast. They move 5. They attack for 4, counterattack for 3, and take 4 hits. And they are 11 points. So definitely, other than the dragon in this expansion, the most expensive thing we have. But they, again, as with almost everything else we have, they have fear and they have impact 3. So going on, just going in on the, even before they do their melee attack, they're going to hit for 3, which is pretty solid. I like them. 11 points. I think 22 points for 2 in an army is definitely worth it. And they have some survivability with wounds and good counterattack and the fear. So this is not necessarily something you're going to need to use your skeletons to block a path to. They can just go out there and rampage a little bit, I think. At least that's going to be how I use them to start. See how that works out. Then the last couple units we've got here, we've got an Aspiring Necromancer. He's fast, he doesn't hit that hard or swing back that hard, and he's pretty soft with only 3 wounds. But hey, he's a finger wiggler. Even if he is kind of pale, he is still a finger wiggler. He's got magic 2, he's a caster, and reanimate 1. So 7 points essentially for the reanimate. He's just going to be your skeleton shield wall builder. You just stick them out there, just keep throwing skeletons out there to clog up lanes as they die. It's he's really only got 1 job. The magic 2 is to my mind just a bonus behind the reanimate 1. And then the Tomb Banshee, you know, they move 4, they attack for 2, defend for 2, and only are pretty soft at 3 wounds, so they don't look all that awesome. But they're mobile and resistant to melee damage, so that's good. And then they have their activation is deal D6 minus 2 magic damage to each non-VC disc within short range. Is their death streak. It's just straight up damage, potential 4 if you're rolling well, to all the non-VC discs within short range. So just send her out there into the middle of a bunch of anything and roll some dice and just yell at people until they die. Again, she is soft, so this is something you're going to want to protect with your skeletons or your direwolves, but her activation ability is just pretty darn cool. So that's it for the discs, and as with Hammer and Hold, it comes with a couple new pieces of terrain. Got the Garden of Moor. I'll try to get that all on camera. Garden of Moor. Actually, no, that's the farmstead, I believe. And then the Garden of Moor, which looks suspiciously graveyardy, not really gardeny, but they both have interesting abilities. The Garden is rough and VC caster discs overlapping with this terrain gain reanimate 1. All the VC casters, I believe, have reanimate, so I've got to check to see if that stacks. If reanimate 1 with somebody that gets a reanimate 1 gets reanimate 2. I'll have to see if that stacks, because that would be nice if it does. And then the farmstead grants cover, and discs overlapping the farmstead are stalwart. So some good abilities, both targeted to the VC or in general. However you want to play that, if you choose to use that terrain. So that's the 2 expansions, Hammer and Hold and Legions of Darkness. I think they both add excellent cores for the VC and the Dwarves to the game, and expand the other core factions or starter factions quite well, and add with the lizards and the rats and the dark elves and the wood elves, good starts either as allies or just or one general armies. Adds across the board, both sides, really good stuff to the game. The artwork on all the cards and discs is, as with the core set, excellent. It's all very thematic and it gives you a feel of what you're doing. The VC definitely look undead. The dwarves do look squat and hard. You know, the wood elves, they're very, but they look like wood elves. The dark elves, everything looks really, really good. Both sets come with all the tokens you're going to need. Both inserts have all the explanation of the new rules you're going to need. So both of these, whether you're going to buy them both or just one if you're an order player or just the other if you're a chaos player, both of these are definitely good adds to the core game. And really, I can't wait to bust out some Dwarf and some VC action against Jeff, because those are the factions I play the most, and then Chaos from the core. So yeah, it's good adds, good artwork, good mechanics, and as with the discs from the core game, the new discs definitely keep to the theme and the mechanical feel of the minis game. So overall, I'm quite happy with both these expansions, and really look forward to getting some more Diskwars on the table. Jeff and I have talked about getting a gameplay video for Diskwars, so hopefully we'll have that. We'll get that done in August. Alrighty, thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one.